pertinent for this conference given the multi-orbit discussion we've been having, right? So they service LEO, GEO. And as we talked about the shift to more consumer-focused markets, we often think that consumers are more sustainability-minded, right? So I think those two topics go hand in hand. Tough questions, but good questions. The next session that we have is entitled Direct-to-Device, a new opportunity to seamlessly integrate satellite connectivity for consumers globally, and it will be moderated by Greg Daffner from GapSat. So can I please ask the panel to the stage? Thank you.
Why don't we move over here so that we get a little bit. So these are no, over here. You move over here. I'll move over here. Okay, thank you. Yes, yes. Good morning. All right, we need responsiveness. We need interactivity. I'm Greg Daffner, and my company, GapSat, is a company that leases entire in-orbit satellites to satellite operators. We're a broker, basically. We're a matchmaker that brings together operators that have satellites in excess of their requirements with satellite operators that need satellites to either start new services or to continue existing services if their replacement satellites are not ready for launch and operation on time. We're going to talk about one of the most exciting new areas of development in the satellite industry, direct-to-device today. It's a huge topic, and we heard a bunch of information about this yesterday from a couple of perspectives. So we're going to bring maybe some additional overview to what that opportunity may be going forward. I would describe it as having four components, and we'll try to touch on as many of these as possible. And to the degree that we miss anything, I rely on you to come back with questions. We're going to talk about market opportunities, technology, regulation, and business viability. So the first issue is the opportunity of the market itself. We all recognize that from a cellular user perspective, there are large parts of our lives and the world that we encounter where we have little or no reception and we can't actually make a call or send an email or get access for video and so forth. One of the things that D2D promises is that they will be able to fill these gaps globally, ultimately. So I think we intuitively know that there's a need. I mean, we experience it ourselves just in our daily lives. There's also a lot of discussion on the other side, which is the use of D2D to bridge the digital divide. Another technology to be able to bring communications to the literally billions of people that don't have connectivity to the to internet and therefore are not part of the digital world that we're all trying to operate in. The second issue of technology is the question of how do you do this? What does it take to be able to deliver from space a connection that will be effective? And we heard yesterday, Mario, the head of the ITU Radio Communications Bureau, describe what would broadly characterized as two spectral approaches. One is this mechanism where we use something which has already built into the system, which is MSS, mobile satellite service frequencies, that are being used today by Inmarsat, by Globalstar, by Iridium, and others. And that is a continuation maybe to a greater consumer public of those kind of services using that spectrum. And there's already a whole international ecosystem for that. The second, and the one that really is the focus of most of the attention of D2D today and for the last several years, is migrating from those frequencies to traditional in your handset already, your regular cell phone handset, using terrestrial cellular frequencies and building that into satellites so that you don't have to get a second separate device in order to be able to communicate directly to those satellites. But that's much more complicated and requires the next issue to be resolved, which is regulation, because those frequencies, the terrestrial frequencies, are not allocated or assigned or licensed for use by satellites. So that requires both an international recognition of this new way of doing it, as well as nation by nation processes to authorize and license the use of those frequencies. And finally, there's the question of how big a deal is this going to be? We know that there's an ongoing debate, which we've heard very little about so far, maybe we'll hear more, concerning the fact that LEOs are only able to cover, that 70% approximately of what they cover is places where there are no people or objects of interest that can be customers that are going to pay for the services. And is that kind of an infrastructure, is that really in the long term going to be the most cost-effective and profitable way providing services versus GEO, where we can concentrate our money and our infrastructure to provide services to where the need and the requirements are, rather than just over ocean areas where there are no planes and there are no ships. So in the case of D2D, we have the additional dimension, whereas in the general LEO scenario, and this is true of GEO and MEO as well, we have aeronautical services and maritime services. But for the most part, I would presume that D2D services would be unlikely to be done directly to individuals sitting in their seats from the satellite versus the onboard antennas that allow distribution via Wi-Fi. And so likewise on ships. So that means that the constellations that are being developed will have even more of a challenge to be able to be profitable, because there's even less of a geographic area that they are likely to be able to serve, which means that they're going to have to make their money where people live and are not served today by terrestrial means. So this is not about me, so I'm going to move directly to the panel. That's the context in which we're going to talk, and I'll let each of the panelists introduce themselves and tell a little bit about what their role is in this new D2D ecosystem. Go ahead, James.
Thanks, Greg. So I'm James Allardyce from Link Global. So we invented this category of what we describe as satellite to mobile phone services, which is slightly different to D2D or a large subset of the overall D2D concept. So we invented the category. We launched a very early commercial service over a year ago. We build our own satellites. We operate them as a satellite operator. We have over 45 mobile operators signed up to launch our service in the coming 12 to 18 months, including many in this region. We are gradually integrating those operators as a roaming integration, and when we do an agreement with them, we allow them to choose or give permission to which of their subscriber base they want to have access to the service, as it would be in the terrestrial roaming ecosystem. We work with them on the regulatory side. So the FCC has already regulated us as a US company to provide commercial services globally, and then we match that up in each country with regulatory permission, and we're going towards 12 countries already given us the go-ahead to start commercial service. Most notably, ACMA in Australia recently published their decision in this regard, which was to allow sat-to-phone services without any further regulation. And so, you know, they're obviously, in our view, thinking about this in the right way. And so that's the most part of our journey so far. I mean, I'll leave it for now and hand over.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Koichiro Matsufuji, co-CEO of Space Compass, a Japanese company. Space Compass was founded 2 years ago by Sky Perfect, JSAT, and NTT, one of the largest telco in the world. As a first step to achieve our goal or vision, so-called Space Integrated Computing Network, we are initiating 2 services. One of them is optical data relay using geo-satellite. The other is HAPS, High Altitude Platform, that includes connectivity services, D2D maybe, and sensing service as well. So Greg asked me to introduce myself within 1 minute, so I will finish them, but I'm very happy to discuss more in this panel. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the kind invitation. My name is Hamza. I'm a senior practice manager for space and connectivity with a high-tech policy consulting firm called Access Partnership. Access Partnership's a 25-year-old company, primarily there to support the development and implementation of regulatory instruments and structures that enable innovation to take place. We believe in making technology accessible for everyone, and then have 5 offices all around the world with about 150 consultants, incredibly active in the space, satellite, and connectivity communities. We've been part of the direct-to-handset, direct-to-device, handset-to-satellite industry for a long, long time, and are very active around issues to do with the ITU, as well as the World Radio Conferences. I'm sure if you've been to a World Radio Conference, you've met one of my colleagues somewhere there. My role is really to lead our space and connectivity work across Asia and the Pacific, where we think that the impact that a technology like D2D can have is immense. I think I do a lot of work with the ITU, particularly directly with the Secretary General on this right to connectivity and really supporting this work towards bridging the digital divide. And with 2.6 billion people all around the world that are currently disconnected, so many of which, more than 50% of which are young people, so many of whom are in this part of the world, we think that the opportunity here is immense. So I'm really looking forward to talking a bit more about the opportunity, some of the legal and regulatory challenges that exist, and in how we can support in bridging those things.
Thank you, thank you. And I think we all agree that we want to be able to extend communications to the widest number of people in the world. As an organization, I think that's what APSCC stands for. James, to start the conversation, you say that Link invented the category, and that's really exciting. I didn't realize that. How do you distinguish yourself? What's the differentiator? So, for example, we've seen a lot of announcements by one of your competitors, AST. They've signed up Verizon and AT&T, who have put a bunch of money into their company. And is yours a Me Too service, or theirs a Me Too for you service? Or do you have something that's a different secret sauce, different approach? How would you describe it?
Well, both companies are trying to solve a similar problem. Our approach is different from an architecture point of view, and you know, arguably from an improved simplicity perspective. Look, as I sort of said in the beginning, right? So we've launched commercial service already. We've had launch announcements and custom pilots with 9 operators across 8 countries. We've signed a huge number of operators to launch the service, and we're focused on building the satellites and getting them up in orbit and extending those services.
Okay. Can you describe just in the highest level what the difference in what you describe as the difference in architecture is?
Well, we're a network in a box, so we can interface with any mobile operator network in the world today. Theirs is a bent pipe approach. So we don't need to have, to start an initial commercial service, we don't need to have any infrastructure on the ground in the country that we're providing the service. So that's also a differentiator for us.
Okay, so there's no gateways in your system, it's just device to satellite to device?
Yeah, there are gateways, but they don't have to be in the country of where the service is.
Okay, so that becomes a regulatory issue of whether traffic is going through a third country and then being backhauled.
Yeah, there are some countries that need or want to have their traffic and have it regulated that way as staying inside the country, and that's a case where we would definitely have a gateway in those countries.
Okay, and just to follow on, the way that your services are provided, and for that matter, some of your competitors, is by partnering with existing licensed cellular operators that have access to spectrum in the countries that you will be operating, so that you're really relying on their licenses and their relationships locally with their governments.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to bring it back down a layer, so the basic problem is, of course, is that why do we not have mobile coverage everywhere? And it's to do with lack of low population density, don't give a return for terrestrial towers to be in these places, or the terrain is just too difficult to put a terrestrial mobile tower in place. So our approach is to say, look, we provide the coverage of wherever the operator want to have it. You decide the subscribers that you want to give access to. You decide the price you want to sell it at, and they can decide where they want to have a terrestrial tower or not, as has always been the case. And that's when we approach a mobile operator, they're bringing to the table spectrum that's already available in the mobile phone, which is obviously key, and they're bringing subscribers. So Link does not have any subscribers. The subscribers come from the mobile operator, and then we allow them to say, well, decide what amount of spectrum they think is right to give us access to deploy essentially what is a mobile service.
Right. Moving to the proposition of using HAPS, high altitude platforms. I think the underlying, I'm not an engineer, but I think the underlying thought is that the closer you bring the asset in the sky to the Earth, the less power you need to get from there to the handset. And of course, the shorter the distance, so the less latency there is. So it sounds like an interesting way of progressing from GEO to MEO to LEO, and now even closer. Can you describe the architecture and how you connect the HAPS then back to the network generally so that you have the whole ecosystem working?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's true. The HAPS is flying over 20 kilometers from the Earth. That's almost same distance for the terrestrial tower. That makes low-profile payload on the HAPS can enable higher speed of D2D connectivity rather than satellite. So we can provide D2D services with an unmodified smartphone. So for the first stage, we plan to use MNO spectrum. So MNO spectrum, that means a terrestrial spectrum.
Okay, yes.
The same as 5G or LTE, but to avoid interference, we will use the vacant spectrum after the end of 3G services, especially in Japan, such content. And our architecture for the first stage is the D2D service spectrum with the backhaul with a gateway that will be used the K-band, Q-band, sorry. So S-band and Q-band system, we plan to create as an infrastructure.
Okay, and so that sounds really exciting. Where are you in terms of the rollout of this architecture, and what's your plan going forward? How quickly will you expand it, and what kind of geographic coverage do you anticipate having over time?
Yeah, we plan to move forward step by step. And in terms of the spectrum, in the near future, we also use the dedicated spectrum for the HAPS that was allocated last WLC. So we will increase the capacity and avoiding interference with the terrestrial network. And for the HAPS, I believe another advantage is the small coverage. It's strange, yes. The large coverage has some advantages, but small coverage by apps has some advantage like the regulatory. So we can customize or localize the payload to match to fit the regulatory by country. So that's one of the flexibility of hubs. So we imaging to help the D2D connectivity. We cannot exclude the LEO constellation D2D, but both complement, I think.
Okay, and just to follow up on that, this is a marriage made in heaven. You have JSAT, which is a satellite operator. You have NTT, which is a telco and mobile operator, combined together, not just partnering, but actually creating a joint venture, which is your company. Why did the satellite side of your company, and I think you came from there, why did they not say, we're going to do a LEO approach? Why? What drove you to using this other technology, HAPS?
I think the world of the LEO constellation is very congested. Link, Starlink, OneWeb, the many players already there. So we don't have to add some more LEO constellation by ourselves. So we can use them. But to differentiate the services, especially for the NTT, Docomo, or other terrestrial operators, telcos, the HAPS is one of the key differentiator, we believe. So we are developing the services, collaborating with the NTT and also JSAT. Under the HAPS itself, we are collaborating with the ART HAPS Airbus company.
And last but not least on this, are other companies around the world adapting a similar approach, or are you alone in doing this for now?
The HAPS?
The HAPS, yeah. The HAPS for these kinds of services, yes.
Yeah. I think there are many types of HAPS in the world. I believe maybe 10 companies are developing the HAPS airship type, solar powered aircraft, fixed wing, such kind of things. There are many programs, but at this moment, still R&D phase, except for the ART HAPS. So we are cooperating with them. So I think we have to show the evidence that to our potential customers, the HAPS can meet their expectations. So we plan to have a flight demonstration in the very near future to show that kind of evidence.
Right. Okay, well, we wish you luck, and I think it's a really exciting concept. Hamza, you're not a provider, but you are a supporter. So you come to it from a different kind of analytic perspective. We've talked together about your observations on the regulatory challenges facing putting together and licensing these systems, and the creation of a harmonized regulatory framework so that it's not every country is completely different and confusing and difficult to navigate. So can you talk a little bit about your observations on that, please?
Yeah, very much so. I think it's completely right. We're a big supporter of and an enabler of this ecosystem and this industry. So last year, we put out a report titled "The Future of Smartphones," really looking at this direct-to-handset market. And in that report, we started by identifying really the economic opportunity that exists at the moment and the economic opportunity that will exist in the next 10 years or so. And we found that by 2035, there's really this potential that the direct-to-handset market will be about 15.5 billion USD all around the world, with benefits ranging up to 1.2 trillion USD coming through with the provision of this type of connectivity to people, both in rural communities, but also in urban communities and in remote parts of the world. We think that there's a lot of value that this technology can unlock, particularly with issues such as disaster management, but just also facilitating more smoother communication and just access for a greater number of people. But like you rightfully pointed out, and like our report highlights throughout, this regulatory piece will really be a key enabler in ensuring that this technology can roll out at the speed that the technology providers are looking to roll it out. I think this question came up just earlier when you asked James about how that relationship or that communication channel works when that transfer takes place between those different jurisdictions. And it's really situations like this where regulatory harmonization and the role of bodies such as the ITU, particularly conferences such as the World Radio Conference, comes to play. So the World Radio Conference in 2027 will play a very important role in supporting the growth of this industry by looking at ways to allocate spectrum for direct-to-device services, to look at standards and best practices for interference prevention, as well as sharing of some of the spectrum and frequency bands that these services depend on. You rightfully mentioned the two business models that exist. We call them the by-the-book model, which is the reliance on this MSS spectrum, and this alternative approach where providers partner with terrestrial MNOs. We think that there are regulatory hurdles in both of these approaches. With the MSS approach, there just isn't enough spectrum available, and this is something that needs to be debated and discussed at the ITU. And with the alternative approach, partnering with MNOs, which was also talked about, I think while hypothetically it sounds great, the way that spectrum can be shared really needs to be determined at that global level and then harmonized across the board so that these rules don't interfere with the operations of some of these companies. We have many plans towards universal service and access in the near future, and that technology-neutral, harmonized regulatory systems will really enable this ecosystem.
Yeah. Okay. Can you bring up the question poll number 4, please? The question here is, what level of service, and I'd like each of you guys to address this. Today, the services that are being provided are characterized as emergency messaging, little SMS, but there have been bold promises of vastly greater kinds of communication. What do you guys think, and what's the timeline, and how are you going to get there?
Well, yes, certainly we're providing SMS services at the moment. We have shown voice as a technical milestone to a number of, quite a few operators, mobile operators already, and data is very much in the works. It is entirely viable. I don't think there should be any doubt. It is really a function of the amount of spectrum the mobile operator wants to allow access to, and the network. So yeah, it's definitely in progress.
Okay.
Yeah, hubs can provide a relatively high data speed bandwidth data, but that depends on the how many subscribers at the same time on.
I think it'll always be very much a collaborative approach between the different segments of the industry. I think D2D will support existing technologies and capabilities that providers have, and ultimately will result in a system where high bandwidth data is available everywhere. I think with regard to specifically how much of that will be enabled by D2D really depends on the way that the technology moves forward. We certainly see examples of low bandwidth data already in place, and we do think high bandwidth data is a possibility, but it really depends on the development of the technology.
Well, we see that the audience is a little skeptical, since it looks like low bandwidth has the majority of expectation. We all hope that we get to high bandwidth video and broadband, but yes, it's even dropping further. Peter, we talked a little bit about this, and I wondered if you had some thoughts.
No thoughts, just questions for James and for Koichiro. For James, anytime you talk about space technology at these conferences, all the engineers love to talk about it. But space technology without money is like, well, I don't know. It doesn't happen. So Starlink, D2D has SpaceX, lots of money. Globalstar has Apple, lots of money. Iridium has its own money, is now producing dividends and profit, and it has its constellation in orbit for its MSS play. Thuraya has Space 42. These guys all have money associated with their endeavors, so they can fund at least partway down the road. So you have SLAM Corporation, which is going to be taking the Link product, Link service, onto the stock market. And this has been 7, 8 months old now. So if you could give us an update on where you are on that, that would be helpful. And for Koichiro, just so you can think about it while James is answering. Now, your consortium recently invested $100 million in Airbus's HAPS called Alto. And my understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, that this is part of a strategy shift at Airbus and Alto away from the commercial market and toward the government and military market. So while HAPS might be very nice in certain Japanese islands and mountainous areas for D2D, the main HAPS job is for government services, at least as far as your consortium's investment in Alto said. Am I wrong about that? So think about that a second. So
Okay.
Go ahead, James.
Thank you, Peter. Good.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Definitely enjoy having your questions every year here. Unfortunately, we are in a public process, and I'm not able to comment.
No, so there's been no developments on that?
Judge is constrained for me to comment.
Okay. So that leaves more time for
Thank you, Peter. Yeah.
Space Compass.
Yeah, as I said, the HAPS is a kind of a regional services. So out or Airbus needs a strategic partner in each region. One of them is Japan or Asia to cooperate with us. And we are also looking for the other partners in other rest of the world. So I think what's the point of your question?
Well,
So use case. So for the first time, or in the first phase, we are looking for the national securities, military or other things. But also we plan to have a dual use type of use case that Japanese government can subsidize some project for us.
okay. All right.
Before you do that, can you put up slide number 3, and so everyone can be thinking about that before we end the session? Slide number 3. Go ahead, Peter, sorry.
Sorry, Hamza, I can't let you slip away here, slither away without making a commitment. So you did a lot of work looking at the D2D market. You're paid by people to do this work. That always influences how people's opinions are. That's just human nature. But I suppose you concluded as to whether it's likely that someone using MNO spectrum is going to get regulatory authorization in more than a few dozen large geography countries. Whether Europe is likely to allow MNO spectrum to be used for this, given the likelihood of interference and the difficulty of having these buffer zones around the coverage area. You know the subject. So did you come to any conclusions as to whether the MSS play, which is already globally licensed, or the MNO sharing spectrum play, which is not globally licensed and will require a lot of delicate carving of coverage areas, right, is the more likely one to reap all this pot of money that you talked about?
Thank you. So we've had the opportunity to work with people in the industry on both sides of the approach when it comes to D2D. And I think that there's a lot of value in the ITU and the World Radio Conferences coming up with an approach that enables both those types of approaches. I think particularly we think that competition in this sort of a market enables innovation to take place faster and increases the incentives that these businesses have to scale their technologies at a greater speed. So what the outcome of the negotiations at the WRC will be, I cannot say at the moment, but certainly we hope to see more MSS bands available for D2D, but we also hope to see more rules and systems for spectrum sharing when it comes to the traditional terrestrial networks. Yeah.
All right, thank you. We have to end the session, but let's end on a interesting little side note here, which is this question. And if each of you guys could just tell us what you anticipate the likely direction for the charging to customers that are using the service. Will it be a premium service? Will it be part of the package? Because basically cellular operators don't have to build the infrastructure in order to cover these areas, and they're using satellite instead, and therefore they just bundle it as part of their offering, or what? How's it going to work out? Just last thoughts.
Well, yes, because there already are operators who are charging a premium for access to our service.
So you anticipate that that'll be the model, that they will charge a surcharge for this?
Yes, that's what I anticipate, yeah.
Okay.
I think at least in Japan, it's very difficult to get premium from the subscribers. But the MNOs need some differentiator to decrease the churn or to get a shift from other MNOs. So that's very useful to deploy D2D services, I think.
And Hamza, last word?
James is right. Operators already do this. I just pulled it up. In Hong Kong, for example, there's an operator that charges users specific amounts of money for specific amounts of time on the Chinese Tiangtong satellite system, for example. So there's a number of minutes that you can pick up for a number of Hong Kong dollars for access to that network. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have. I want to say thank you to our panelists. Thank you for the questions, and thank you for your answers.